Good afternoon. Hello. So I'm an editor, and that means I spend a ridiculous amount of time looking for stories. But what I have learned is that a great story has three things. It has a hero, it has a problem that needs solving, and then it has a resolution to that problem. Now, I'm also really into books, and I'm going to share a couple of my favorites. One of them is the great Chinua Achebe, his book, Things Fall Apart. I'm not going to give away the ending, but it's about a simple yam farmer whose problem is that he lives in a society that's just changing so quickly, and he wants to stay true to himself. And we follow him as readers through this personal journey where he makes really amazing personal decisions based on risking everything. And it's this story that really makes you want to see how it turns out. Another book is Under the Net by Iris Murdoch. And here we follow a young artist in post-war London, and his problem is that he's looking for love in all the wrong places. And we find that he interacts with some of the most eccentric, colorful people, really wanting to know them in a deep and meaningful way. And so the thing is that these books are very different, but they have one thing in common, and it's authors who make their heroes solve problems. Now, we're here at TED, and I'm in a room full of people who are creative thinkers. You're all open to new ideas and new challenges, and you've all got leadership qualities. And I put it to you that all of these ingredients mean that you have the tools to be an author. And so I'm inviting you to author a new narrative for Tottenham for the 21st century. We already have some pretty good stories. There's this guy, his name is Luke Howard. By day, he's a pharmacist, but his true passion is looking at clouds and wanting to name the clouds. And he wants to solve the problem of the fact that he wants to work out what the weather is going to be like 2, 3, 4, 5 days from the day that he's working out the weather. And he talks a lot about it, and he comes to lectures like TED, and people are starting to take notice of the clouds. In fact, he becomes the namer of clouds, and he is so influential. His classification of the cloud system is so influential that a great painter named John Constable also begins to pay attention to clouds. And what you get is this. It's the Hay Wain, which is a seminal piece of British art, and it hangs in the National Gallery. Another story of an elderly woman who is literally frightened to death in her home by some pretty heavy police tactics. The problem here is that fuels a riot, the Broadwater Farm riots. Now, the solution to that was a man, a local councillor, who then became the first MP in Tottenham, who was Bernie Grant, and he was the first black parliamentarian to enter the House of Commons. And he worked tirelessly to address the problems that created community disharmony. And today we stand in a building that commemorates him. And my point is that we can all become the heroes of a story, and we can all create a new narrative for Tottenham. This is Cliff. He's one of our local heroes, and he's got a great story. He came over to London with his family in the 1950s. And like many from the Windrush generation, his family struggled. But one thing that him and all his friends had were bicycles. And they learned how to find bicycle parts, mix and match components, and him and all his friends had bicycles. Now, fast forward some time into the future, him and his friends are trying to take some kids from the local neighborhood out for a bike ride, and he notices that a lot of the children don't have bicycles. And why is this? Well, they said, well, my parents can't really afford a bicycle. So he set up the Rockstone Foundation with some other members of the community. And what the Rockstone Foundation does is they teach young kids how to reuse and recycle old bicycle parts, and just as he did as a child. And what this means is that he's inspiring the next mechanic, next engineer, the next designer. And what it is, it's skill sharing across generations, and kids get to have a bit of fun, some fresh air, and some exercise. Why is this important? It's important because today in Tottenham, by the time you're 11, you and your friends have 1 in 3 chance of being obese. That means that either you or your other 2 friends are at risk of heart disease, asthma, and type 2 diabetes. If you come from a poor background and if you're not in social housing, then your risk of food hunger and homelessness is a real thing, a real daily thing. But like I said, we've got heroes in our midst, and they're co-writing a new narrative for Tottenham as we speak. There's a group called Living Under One Sun, and they were mums who got together, who wanted to share their stories and do the most social, natural thing that we do when we share stories. We share food at a table. And together, they sort of did this ritually over 6 years, and now they have their own community allotment over in Tottenham Hill. And they're also urban beekeepers. And what this is to me, it's like it's the health and well-being chapter, right? So what we're teaching our children is to have a new relationship with food, because as urbanites, it's really, really difficult to get to the source of food. We become so divorced from it, where chicken comes in a box or vegetables are frozen things that you see in plastic bags. And this re-educates our communities and our young people to have a relationship with growing your own food, eating your own food, and also eating well. So the thing about London is that regeneration is a thing, but more than that, it's gentrification. And there's no way to get around gentrification. It's happening in London, it's happening all over the world, really, in all the major city centers, and Tottenham is not immune to it. Now, the big developers saw this, and they submitted some plans, and the plans were, they're okay, but they were really chain stores that would eventually drive up the price of renting business in the local area. And a group called Save, they started a campaign called Save Ward's Corner. It's the Ward's Corner Community Coalition, which is part of a larger coalition called Our Tottenham. And they decided that the local businesses needed to stay, and they lobbied, and they got to have a section of Ward's Corner for the local community. And what this ensures is a kind of diversity in our high road. And the plans that they're putting forward are really creative. I mean, they're taking that Edwardian facade and really asking to use your imagination here. And they're melding that with the best of 21st century design, natural light, energy efficiency, shared space. And what's happening here is an idea, an imagining of Tottenham not being just a consumption hub, but a community hub. This is Lordship Rec. When I first moved to Tottenham with my family and we settled down roots here, this was a disused, neglected green space. And a group called Friends of Lordship Rec recognized that green space and air quality is really important to our lives. The World Health Organization estimates that 80% of the deaths related to air pollution, and bad air quality is to do with heart disease and stroke. And in Tottenham, we have the highest rate of heart disease in the country. Now, what this means for us is that we have a group of community members who've decided that they want to build green space into our narrative, into our story. And now the Lordship Rec is this vibrant green space where walkers and runners and bicycle clubs and wildlife enthusiasts all come together in this one place. And at the center of it is is a building. It's a passive house building, and it's community run, and it's run by volunteers, and it's also owned by the community, which is an interesting model. This is also a place where we have a chapter in creative business, and Josie Hendo is a sustainable fashion designer who has a studio up in Northumberland Park. And what she does is she takes disused textile, so denim, jeans that get thrown out and end up in landfill. She takes them and she recycles them and she reimagines them into something different. She reimagines them into a new design, and she incorporates tree bark cloth from her native Uganda into the designs. And what you have is a garment at the end of its life cycle that has been reused, it's reduced textile landfill, and it's truly a recycled product. And this is a new way of working, a really creative way of working, and addressing all the problems that we see with the fast fashion industry. There's a really interesting chapter that's being built as well. That's, I like to call it the creative capital chapter. So in the UK, the creative and cultural industries contribute about £6 billion into the economy. And what we're seeing in Tottenham, actually, is a bit of a renaissance. So this is, to the west, we have the Turnpike Lane Art Group, and they've put street art on the map. You know, they commission street artists to make the environment look a little bit more interesting with graffiti like this. And then to the east, we have the Gaunson House, which is near Markfield Park, and in it houses 2 art studios. It houses the Mill Street Studios and Euro Art Studios. And London today is an interesting place. While it's very creative and there's a lot going on and there's a lot of art, the artists can't actually afford to live or work in central London. And I do really believe that Tottenham is one of the last great places, one last sort of fertile grounds for creative thinking, because artists can still afford to live here. And in the middle of this, bookmarked between street art and fine art, is a music scene called Grime, which have risen up through up from these streets. And you know, the record companies aren't looking to the X Factor. They're not looking to Britain's Got Talent for the next great thing. You know, they're tuning into our pirate radio stations. They're scouting at our clubs. And what they are tapping into is like a youth culture, a really vibrant youth culture that reminds me a lot of punk, which was the last defining cultural bit of subculture that was truly London. And we have that with us here today. Now, I know you're thinking, I'm not a writer. I read books, but I'm not a writer. I'm saying that you're an author. And to make the narrative of Tottenham something that's really 21st century is about co-creating a narrative with other authors and looking at Tottenham as a place that isn't a dystopia. It's not an Orwellian dystopia or a Dickensian tragedy. There is a renaissance that is happening, and it's a collective renaissance. And you, if you choose to be bold, if you choose to be a hero in your story and in the stories of others, you will chart the rise of the Tottenham Renaissance. And so here we are today, and it's up to you to decide whether or not you will be the hero of your story, and if you will co-create. And I invite you to collaborate with others in your community to create a new narrative for our Tottenham. Thank you.